Hey, Nichole Huntsman, your astrologer from moderncosmic.com. Today we're going to talk about the progressed moon. And as you know, just this past weekend, I'm an avid reader, and actually I'm a lover of many different authors. One in particular, I love Joseph Campbell. He's someone who, anyone who studies astrology in depth is going to appreciate someone like Joseph Campbell. He's an American, well, was an American comparative mythologist, author, lecturer, a man who has studied myth across all different cultures and throughout time. So, and written many books. He's fascinating. Some very great actual talks of his on YouTube. You can also find him on Spotify. So, but with Joseph Campbell, one of his more famous, I suppose, suppositions was this idea that throughout storytelling we've used the hero's journey. He's titled it the Monomyth. And the Monomyth is this process of when you take a protagonist, it's them moving through these three main stages of initially sort of separation from their comfortable life into initiation into sort of herohood, and then return, coming back and bringing back whatever they learned back to sort of their starting point, their homeland. Okay. When you look at the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 signs also move through a progression, and they follow the hero's journey pretty precisely. Now, there are different takes on the hero's journey. Some people have sort of consolidated all of the different stages. As I said, there are the three main stages, and then there are like these sub-stages of the hero's journey. And so there are different takes on the stages. My personal approach that I'm using today, I've broken them down into 12 stages. They fit very nicely and neatly. Even looking at his sub-stages, we can toss them into the categories that, such as the 7th house, Libra archetype, and the 8th house, Scorpio archetype. They fit quite nicely. So the one thing that is not really a part of the monomyth is Aries, the very first sign. It's kind of this assumption that we have a protagonist. We have a hero to start with. And so there's not like a stage that's number one, here's the hero. You know, it's like number one, ta-da, the hero's here in his life, his ordinary world. Okay, so I do take that liberty of sort of adding stage one. Stage one for me is going to be Aries, and it's the protagonist, it's the hero. It's that emergent stage. Okay. Other than that, we're going to follow through the 12. Now, progressed moon. We're talking about this relative to the progressed moon. The progressed moon, before I get into technically, explaining what it is a progressed moon is, the progressed moon for an astrologer is used as sort of a forecasting tool to get a feel for where a native is at in their emotional evolution. As humans, emotion, I would say, is the factor that makes us, that sort of separates us from being a plant versus being, I don't know, something that's just pure consciousness but doesn't have a feeling or values-based judgment on what we're perceiving. So emotion is very important. The moon is, in astrology, depending on the type of astrology you practice, some would say it's unconscious, some say it's conscious. I personally come from the space where I feel like the moon transcends this idea of consciousness, unconsciousness. I'm going to lean that it's more unconscious because you have something happen in your life and you respond to it emotionally. It's not like you go, you're going to have a feeling. You see someone get hit by a car, you're going to immediately either care or not care. It's not really something you process so much with your mind, as it's just an instantaneous, unconscious, before you maybe even know what you're looking at kind of a response. So that to me is the moon. The progressed moon, therefore, is showing our process of evolving emotionally and maturing. So as we go through the 12 zodiac signs, this takes approximately, our moon, progressed moon, spends about 30 months in each zodiac sign. So just in case you don't know what a progressed chart is, the progressed chart is simply, we take the birth chart, all the planets in the birth chart, okay, I was born September 27th, okay? Let's say we want to see my birth chart for the age of 3. We're going to look at September 30th, 1977, my birth year. We're going to look at 3 days after my birth date. That will tell you where I was at 3 years after my birth year, okay? So it's a day of life from the birth date equals a year of life from the birth year, basically, all right? So All right, that being said, your progressed moon, because the moon, of course, is so close to us, it's our little satellite, moves very quickly through our sky, we can see that it is moving, moves every month, it moves about a degree through around the zodiac. And that's going to be backwards because my camera's backwards, but anyway, you get the point. All right, so if we consider the hero's journey as a universal, I don't have time right now, obviously, to get into the proofs behind why the monomyth or the hero's journey is something you should definitely study, but suffice it to say, you can look across cultural divides, and you can look at our storytelling, you can look at our movies, the epic movies that we have really sort of glommed onto culturally. They have the hero's journey present. You can see every single stage. And the hero's journey, again, is the zodiac. The zodiac is just a progression through a human experience. It's starting from the center, from who you are, it's Aries, it's a seed, moving all the way out into Pisces, which is just, it's the collective, it's everything. It's everything you can see and you can't see, it's the wholeness. So, and then coming back to that central singular point of Aries. So, all right, now let's move through the zodiac. We're going to start first with Aries, and we'll go through each zodiac sign. You can use Aries or you can use first house. They're both going to sort of have similar symbolisms. You're going to need to blend where your progressed moon is at relative to zodiac sign and which house it is in, unless you're lucky enough to have your accidental houses be the same as your natural houses. In that case, you just have to look at the one thing. But most of us, if you're using like Plasta's house system, you've got to blend the two archetypes. The progressed moon can also be looked at in a relationship chart. So if you want to look at the composite, you create a composite chart with your partner, you can look at the progressed moon there as well. Or you can also look at the Davison. Do both. Sometimes you'll have the same moon in both charts. Sometimes it'll be different. So I recommend looking at both, and it's just gives you more information about where the relationship is at in its development, because that is its own. You've got different relationships with different people. They're always in different spaces, different phases in the evolutionary process. So we've got Aries first, and this is also the first house. If your progressed moon is in either of these places. Aries is the sign, the archetype that's asking, who am I? Right? As a viewer of a movie, or if you're reading a book, many times we are introduced to the protagonist pretty quickly in the story. Not always, but let's imagine we have a pretty simple story. We need to know who the protagonist is, right? Who am I? And so it's this stage of emergence. With Aries, we have a focus on the physicality of existence. You are born into this body, born into this world. You have a place. So there is a quality of fighting for things. There is the potential of what it is you could do with your life. It's like you're a seed. A seed holds all of this information, but it's not yet the plant, right? It's got to experience being dropped in the ground. It has to shed it's got to crack open that shell of itself. It's got to like dissolve in a sense, right? There has to be this element of it being broken down in order for it to access its deeper, information, its intelligence. It's the same thing with Aries. Aries in and of itself, if you've got someone who is an unevolved sort of Aryan personality type, they can be highly selfish and they can spin their wheels a lot because they're focused just on their own needs and they're not moving into the steps of, it's like having a seed in a packet. Like, what good is that going to do you? It doesn't do you any good. Drop it in the ground, get some water on it, get it dirty, in the darkness, then it can sprout open. And that's when Aries, when it sprouts out of the ground, that's when you have the power of what potentiality can become. So with Aries, again, when your progressed moon is in Aries, the questions of who am I? Who am I? What is this journey all about relative to me? We can be a little bit, let's say I actually have a client who was in a relationship for a long time where she was kind of getting taken advantage of, and she'd just been moving through, 30 months of her progressed moon in Pisces, so she was very kind of wishy-washy in her fourth house, so she was just kind of focused on her personal security in this relationship and like wanting it to be something that it wasn't, yada, yada. It moved into Aries and she was like, oh, hell no. She just all of a sudden could see very clearly what she wanted. And she was ready to start over. She was ready to, she'd had her ego sort of dissolve and she was ready to move back into that space of actively engaging in her story. Okay, her journey, her hero's journey. This astrology is just it's just personal mythology. That's all astrology is. It's your personal mythology. So she was like, okay, I am ready to, I've got pen in hand. Let's write this new story. That's Aries. Okay, so then we move into the second house, or we move into Taurus. The next 30 months, your progressed moon moves into Taurus. And the question here becomes, how in the hell am I going to survive? Like, how am I going to survive this situation? And what's the safest, most secure way to survive said situation? Okay, that's kind of the underlying question being asked with the progressed moon in Taurus. It doesn't mean that life is necessarily difficult or that it's easy. We're not placing any sort of judgment over what's happening in your life. Okay, it's not about that. It's about emotionally, you're going to come from a space of, can I consolidate my energy and my resources so that I can be safe? I don't want to be surprised by things. So in a concrete way, you'd see this show up in the chart of someone who all of a sudden was very interested in commitment from the partner in a relationship, let's say, or with their business, with work. Let's say you've got an entrepreneur. They're going to be focused on growth. Let's just keep moving it ahead, steady she goes. There's not a desire to kind of be risk-taking and take on new adventures. We tend to be a little bit more like, okay, let's just calm down a little bit. We just spent 30 months in Aries where we were a little bit, whoa, a little aggressive and kind of taking things on. And now we need to kind of calm things down a little bit and create some security for ourselves. So there's, as I said, many times a requirement. We desire commitment from the partner. We can be a little more possessive of our partnerships, of the situations in our life. The second house and Taurus have to do also with our sense of, our self-esteem, our self-worth, what we value. So we can become a little bit more stubborn about, getting the things set up in such a way that it feels safe and comfortable to us. So again, that question, how will I survive life? Okay, so 2.5 years of a slower, little heavier, it's just a more steady she goes kind of energy and emotional reaction. And this is the equivalent of the ordinary world in the Monomyth. Sorry, I should have said that at the beginning. The ordinary world. Think Hobbit as like the best visual. Okay, so whenever I've watched Lord of the Rings or like The Hobbit, and you see the houses the hobbits live in. They have these little houses with little round doors. They're underground. They're all safe, and it's all pastoral and beautiful, and everyone just does their thing. And I have my sun in the second house along with Pluto and my North Node. So like I like this idea of just, oh, that looks very lovely. Like that feels like everyone's going to be okay, right? But then you move into the next stage of the hero's journey, and that's when the storm starts a brewing. There's like wind shaking the trees, and there is something coming, and that's the Gemini third house stage. It's the call to adventure. It plays out in different ways in myth. Some calls to adventure can come through some parapsychological event. Some could be just an event happens, and your father was struck down by the fief of the kingdom and you have to go avenge his whatever, I don't know, Inigo Montoya kind of a thing. Okay, whatever. Something happens and the hero is required to discover in the world around them their own story. And it's not the same as the Aries. Aries is about who am I, kind of. It's just sort of who am I in the story, right? Gemini is more about, okay, let's name some things. What's happening around me? There's a storm a-brewing, and I've got to, there's like a fly in here. I've got to understand my personal story. So we're curious. We want to explore. I see this in the charts of people when they're reading a ton, or they're writing, or they are actively pursuing, like what have been other people's thoughts on life and existence, the big why, who, where, the big questions, why are we here, that kind of thing. So we become curious. Now, with this can come, there's this need for stimulation with Gemini. There's this fear of boredom with Gemini. We inherently need to move. So you think of the hero's journey, a call to action is the call to adventure is to take action of some kind, to do something. So there's a tension there. There's this, I'm so comfortable. I'm like a hobbit. It's great. I have like my hobbit food and my hobbit bed and my round hobbit doors and big furry feet, and like I know what to expect, and you're wanting me to step out of that. So this is Gemini. All of the cadent houses, the mutable signs have this element of like tension between feeling secure with the fixed signs and then moving into the cardinal signs where we're doing something, okay? So with the call to adventure, we have to kind of decide, what the hell is my story? Like what is this all about, okay? I will say this, I have seen progressed moon in Gemini along with progressed moon in the third house and progressed moon conjunct natal Mercury, progressed Mercury, even solar arc Mercury. I have seen this in the charts as anecdotally where there have been issues of infidelity. So not to say that if your partner has their progressed moon in Gemini or with any of these placements that they're cheating on you, but there is a boredom that can set in. There is a need to discover, and there is big time. Remember, moon is unconscious. We will project what's happening inside of us onto a partner, onto another person. If we feel an inner tension and a desire to leave comfort and safety, which would be the existing partner, to sort of the call to adventure, right? To move out into the outer world, into some other thing, sometimes we will unconsciously put that energy onto another person, and it can lead to like, infidelity. So just of note, something that I've noticed. Now, the next step after the call to adventure would be as Joseph Campbell would say, what does he call it? It's like the reluctant hero. It's the refusal. He's like, I refuse that call. I am good. I'm a hobbit. I got my food. I got my stuff. This is comfortable. Why would I want to go out, risk my safety to save your ass, or to this, right? This concept. So this desire to maintain our personal security. Many times, the initial refusal of the call happens when the progressed moon moves into Cancer or into the fourth house. Now let's get a little bit deeper on this, because ultimately it's security. Where do I belong? Where is home? Where am I safe? Where am I emotionally? Can I just go, and like exhale, right? Progressed moon in Cancer, progressed moon in the fourth house has to do with this realm. In the hero's journey, as the little, I guess, are we being a hobbit? I guess we are. As a little hobbit, he's like, I'm comfortable here. Bilbo Baggins, he doesn't have any desire to leave said place. He's safe. He knows what to expect. But the second part of the refusal of the call is, of course, the acceptance of the call. Or else we wouldn't have a monomyth. We would just have a guy that's stuck in that the first portion, the first phase, the separation phase, just looping through the separation phase. So that's like, you're going nowhere with that. So our hero accepts the call. Cancer is a cardinal sign. Cardinal signs have to do with, when we're talking about this progression, starting new things. Cancers come from a space of creating safety and security for themselves. Okay, so emotional safety and security. They are a highly personal sign. Cancers can be the personality type. They're one of the most sensitive personality types, very sensitive to other people, but it's like an introverted feeling function, if I'm using like Myers-Briggs. It is more about their inner value system. Oh my gosh, fly, go away. The fly is like on his own hero's journey right now, I think. Anyway, he's like doing the 8th house stuff. But okay, so with Cancer, it's I am on my own personal, this is they're looking at everything from the personal lens, the personal perspective. I'm safe, this feels safe to me, but I really care about this other thing that I know I have to go out and battle for. I have to go fight for this. I know that my own security will be harmed if I don't go out. It's very sort of counterintuitive. If I don't go out and fight for this thing, I know my security will be harmed. This is why some of my most wealthy clients have strong Cancer in their chart. Cancer sun, Cancer moon, Cancer rising. Not always. I mean, it takes a whole chart. But I have seen some of my most ambitious male clients in particular have strong Cancer. They have to have a purpose, someone to fight for, someone to protect. That's super common. If they don't have that, that's when you have a pretty depressed individual. Okay, so let me look at my notes here. Yeah, so the focus also, if we just make this more concrete, in your life, you may be thinking a lot about your literal house, your home. You see a lot of people doing things to their house, building a new house, renovating their house, redecorating their house, feng shuiing their house, whatever, like making their home a space where they feel safe and secure. But also look at the other zodiac sign. If this is, or the other house, if this is a Cancer progressed moon, but it's in the 5th house, this is going to take on an element of the Leo side of things. Maybe this is when someone has a child, you know, it just depends on the blending of the symbols. Perhaps I am bringing people into my personal space that feel like family to me. Perhaps I am rethinking what it means to belong to a family. You know, issues of the childhood home can come up, issues of our personal emotional security, and we tend to feel more sensitive during this. And you got to look at the native or the natal moon placement. You know, you got to look at the whole chart of the individual. If you've got someone who has a Cancer moon, then they're going to be in their element, right? But if you've got somebody who has like a Capricorn or an Aries moon, let's say, they're going to be kind of like, oh, geez, you know, it's an adjustment phase. It's learning about opening up and cracking the shell. See, it's like the little seed. It's allowing that little seed. We're putting water on it, Cancer, right? The waters of emotion, of these deep unconscious waters of belonging and what that means and loss and blah, 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 in order to crack open that seed so that little seed can become more than just a seed, but maybe, let's say it's a little acorn. It can grow into a big, huge, amazing tree, a big oak tree at some point. So anyway, all right. Now after Cancer, that question, where do I belong? Like, where am I safe? But just where do I belong? Maybe I belong on the journey, right? The hero's journey. Okay, next we move into Leo, or the 5th house. This is the archetype of, okay, I've accepted the journey. I was kind of a pussy, but then I accepted it. Here I am. Okay, for what was I chosen? Who am I? Like, what? Not who am I like Aries, but like, what is my unique handprint? What can I leave that no one else can leave? Okay, so when the progressed moon's in Leo, we have these challenges come. I'll use a personal example. Progressed moon in Leo, I started my astrology practice, started doing it professionally. As my progressed moon moved into Leo, I then, after, I don't know the exact dates, a year and a half or so of it being in Leo, I had this great job opportunity come up that would use my skills as a speaker and would make good money, and it had travel. It was in the medical industry. I've got lots of Virgo on my chart. I love medicine. It was like a no-brainer. So I'm like, yeah, let's try that. Did it and got to travel with my best friend. It was a really fantastic experience. But I knew that was not I was not chosen for that. That was not what I was chosen for. And so I left. I stopped doing it. And as soon as I made that decision, that active, conscious decision, I tried it. I did it. It wasn't just me guessing. It was like, that's how that went down. It's not for me. And I jumped back into astrology, and I will never look back. I can't imagine ever doing anything other than what I do for work. Because I love it. It's what I am passionate about and what I'm good at. It's for what I was chosen. Okay, so Leo, these questions of our personal identity kind of come to the surface. And think of Narnia. Think of the lion, you know, Aslan. Is that how you say his name? Aslan. I know he kind of holds space as like a Christian, because I think C.S. Lewis wrote the story, right? Like he's Christ. He's the Son, S-O-N. Could also be the equivalent of S-U-N, the sun, okay, which rules Leo. Leo, the lion, this is the solar principle, even that big mane, it's that persona that we put on, in a sense, right? In order to step out in the world boldly and confidently, to interface with the world around us, to do the job we're here to do. It's still highly personal, though. It's still about my own. It actually reminds me of a child playing and putting on a costume. Not in the same way that Pisces shapeshifts. It's like your ego. In this incarnation, I came here to do this thing and to do it really well. Okay, so progressed moon in Leo, progressed moon in the 5th house, our own egocentric issues kind of come to the surface. And a lot of it has to do with life purpose. So the big questions about what am I doing for career? Is this relationship right for me for like the long haul? Is this something that I feel like is meant to be? Does this help me be more self-expressive, more creative, okay, more uniquely me? So in the hero's journey, this is the guide, meeting the guide. I'm really not doing a very good job of saying these things first, but it's meeting the guide, and you know, Aslan, the lion, being kind of the guide in this situation, the guide that's going to show you your potential. They're going to show you who it is you are. It can be an actual person, or it can be something like, for me, astrology, right? So for me, it was just stepping into the thing that I just love, and knowing as an ideology or a philosophy or practice, whatever you want to refer to astrology as, it was my guide and it was my Aslan. It was like, okay, this is what I love to do. This is what makes sense for me. It's where I can leave a unique imprint, which moves us then to the 6th house. The 6th house is Virgo. Progressed moon in Virgo or in the 6th house, we are talking about the question of, okay, now how can I use these gifts? Sorry, as I fix my screensaver. I have these gifts, have my lion's mane, right? What can I do to serve other people with these gifts? So as far as the monomyth goes, this is the crossing the threshold. And in astrology, we're at the bottom of the chart. We're about to jump into the top half, the top hemisphere, the top half of the chart, which we're going from the personal houses up to the collective houses. It's me and other people. It's not just about me, but it's my relationship to others. Right before we jump in there, we have the Virgo archetype, which is about the recognition that we can't do it alone, that we are part of a whole thing, that there is divinity, whatever that might be for you. There's divinity. There's this concept of wholeness, of this perfected thing, okay? And we're a part of that, but we're not perfect. We're imperfect. We're here trying to move towards divinity, trying to move towards wholeness to a certain extent. I personally think we're whole, but as a sort of metaphor, there's this idea with Christianity. You can say Virgo's the virgin archetype, right? So in Christianity, you have this concept, this patriarchal religion, Judeo-Christian religion, where we're moving from all of the goddess worship religions. We've moved into sort of the period of time we've got the Hebrews, and it's patriarchal. And the feminine, the females, are the ones that take the fall. Okay, so you've got the Garden of Eden story where the serpent comes and he's like, here, have a little bit of this fruit, from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And then she's like, oh, good. She eats it. And then she gives it to her husband. And then God comes and her husband totally sells her out. Adam's like, yeah, the chick made me eat the fruit, And then they get cast out of the garden. Now, the idea here being that the woman, the fruit is sex, in my mind. This is my take on the scriptures. Okay, the fruit is sexuality. It's reproduction. It is, for humans to survive, for humans to exist, we have to experience life, we have to reproduce. Okay, so that's sexuality. It's everything that comes with our biology. I think the snake is actually, he represents DNA, but that's a whole other story. But anyway, so point being, back to Virgo, females, this archetype represents the guilt that is held for having sort of sinned or separated ourselves from God by becoming human and earthly. And then the guilt that we have that we're not perfect, that we're separated from God, and we want to return back to that space. And so that's why you have this idea of being perfectionists with a lot of strongly Virgo personality types. They're not self-serving, they're self-sacrificing. They're very service-oriented. Tons of people in the healthcare industry, all have strong Virgo. Someone who has a desire to serve as a school counselor, like my cousin, will have a loaded 6th house. There's this desire to make things whole again, to make them, to perfect things. And so it's very altruistic. And when you're looking at the hero's journey, this is the crossing of the threshold. You have to decide, okay, take a big breath. Okay, I'm ready to use my skills to then step into the outer world, to jump into the adventure. And so as we move into the 7th house, we've crossed the threshold from the profane to the sacred. And traditionally, it would have been done through religious worship, religious devotion. We cross the threshold into a space that has a sacred quality to it. I would say it's also when we step into that space of the sacred with another person, where it's just you and that other person sharing an intimate moment. That's 7th house stuff. Now, to a certain extent. 7th house, let's move in here. So we move into the 7th house, we've got, as far as Joseph Campbell, I almost said Joseph Smith. That was my former Mormon roots coming through. Joseph Campbell, he says, this would be the tests. It's also the allies and the enemies portion of the hero's journey. It's You know, you've got the people that are there to help you, and there are those who are there to thwart you, but ultimately they're there to help you as well. I'm actually going to stop right here. Hold on, bear with me. We'll pick up on part 2 in just a sec. I've got to stop this so I don't run out of memory. Okay, we'll pick up with Libra. Let's move into the second portion of this monomyth and the progressed moon. So the progressed moon, as it moves through sort of the journey of the monomyth, the stages. We're talking right now about Libra, progressed moon in Libra, progressed moon in the 7th house. And the monomyth, this would equate to the tests or meeting with the ally or meeting with the enemy. You know, 7th house in astrology is everything from the partner, the best friend. There's kind of an impersonal quality to the 7th house to a certain extent. And it's the enemy. It would be, if you're in court with someone, it would be the person that you've gone to court with. So the 7th house, because if you think about this as far as it being a process of evolution, we've moved from the 6th house, from the bottom portion of the chart, which is very personal. There's that egocentric quality, that childlike quality, the 5th house. 6th house, Virgo, we're starting to learn how to serve other people, but we're still with the 6th house, we're not quite getting our needs met 100%. We move up into the 7th house, there's a bit of an immaturity. I don't mean literally someone who's got strong Libra, strong 7th house, that they're immature. They could be perfectly lovely human being. But when it comes to the relating with another person, there's a stage of we want harmony. We're moving away from ourselves to meet the other and to find that middle ground and to find balance with that other person. With that can come a fear of showing them all of our stuff. And so we will hold in anger. We will hold in ugliness. We will keep things light and charming and fun. And, you know, there's this romantic, flirtatious quality to Libra. It's a very social archetype. And so as the progressed moon moves into Libra, we might be dabbling in a relationship of some kind that is a legitimate, you know, coming together, a dating, a relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend thing, or maybe we're married, whatever it might be for you. Depends on the house placement again. But concentrating on my needs versus someone else's needs and finding like that in-between space. And you know what they say about compromise? It's like where neither of us wins. It's like where neither of us gets what we want. And so the 30 months that our progressed moon spends in Libra, we're trying to figure out, how do I balance what I am wanting with what a partner is wanting? And as far as the monomyth goes, the hero's journey, this is finding, you see this in, think of like Harry Potter, and you think of the different characters, Hermione and Harry, and, you know, I don't know, they're off on their little adventures together, and they're having little fights with each other, and then they make up with each other, and they get back together, and things are good. And you know, there's just that adjusting that happens when anytime you have two human beings in a room together. You know, there's adjustment that has to happen. So progressed moon in the 7th house, these sort of the question of, how do I meet the other? How do I meet the other in the middle? At the beginning, we can swing a little bit too far to the side of giving away too much, trying to be too Libran, too conciliatory, too, we can defer too much to the partner and focus too much on the harmony of the relationship at the expense of all else. And then towards sort of the second half of the progressed moon being in this archetype, we start to come back to center and realize that, oh yeah, Libra is the polarity of Aries. Aries, remember, that's our seed. That was our first sign. That's the hero. I learn who I am through understanding who you are. That helps me understand myself better. And so a lot of times, let's say we're dealing with issues of narcissism or codependency or whatever, you know, pseudo psych label you want to put on things, or I guess that's not pseudo psych, but you know what I'm saying, whatever label you want to put onto things, you may pull into your space someone who reflects that perfectly, because they're going to show you. And then you have to decide, oh, geez, is that really how yes, it is. Okay, you have to decide what to do with that. Are we going to continue on this journey together, or are we going to go our separate ways? Okay, so that's a Libran. Now, also, we may be more interested in the refinement of our artistic pursuits, music, beautifying whichever house it falls into. You know, might be interested in bringing beauty to that part of our lives. If it's in the 6th house, maybe we start focusing on some sort of public service even. Maybe we start an art program for after school kids. It's free or something. I don't know. It could be a lot of options. But point being, we're allying ourselves with people who are different than ourselves in order to learn more about the self and about our own journey, our own myth, our own hero's journey. Okay, after this comes this is the doozy. This is every movie. When you watch a movie that has like an intense part where there's just shit flying and people are dying or people are betraying each other, and it's the part where you're going, it's the part of the movies that I really like. But then at the same time, I'm like, ooh, it's the cringy stuff, right? Eighth house is the house of death, rebirth. As far as the monomyth goes, this is what he would call sort of the ordeal. Or I think he starts with the approach, which is kind of seventh house-ish, but the approach, and then there's the ordeal. There's the death and there's the rebirth, And this is in Harry Potter. There's just that scene where he sort of dies, right? And then he's sort of reborn. That's Scorpio. That is the dark night of the soul. You're going to experience, I think it's Jeffrey Wolf Green that talks about loss, betrayal, and abandonment. Those are sort of the issues of the Scorp or the eighth house themes. Because you can't, it's just like the seed that we planted in the ground, we put in the ground, that was in the dirt, that's Taurus, got it sort of, aerated a little bit, that's kind of Gemini. Then we put some water on it, that's Cancer. Fifth house, put some sun on it, that kind of warmed up the earth. Sixth house, it had to kind of do a little bit of work. And then all of a sudden, seventh house, it starts to experience the pressure of its potentiality and sort of its environment around it. And then eighth house, you have it kind of, in a sense, I suppose, the degradation of this shell of that seed, and it starts to spring forth. But there has to be the seed breaking down first, the death of that seed. It's no longer serving a purpose as a seed. It was great when you had that seed in a packet and it needed to stay in your shed for a couple of years or whatever. But now that it's in the ground, we want to plant out of it. So we need Scorpio, we need Pluto, we need death, we need death. That's why we put shit in our gardens, right? Like that's how you. It's a cycle. And so with this part of the progressed moon, intense emotion, we may be facing something such as a betrayal. We could be facing a personal betrayal. Look at where it falls. Maybe it's in the first house, and it's our own personal sense of power. Maybe at the beginning of this progressed moon, maybe the first year, we are fighting with everyone. We're just pushing up against everyone until we finally learn to let go of our ego, like dissolve it, let it go of the fighter. It's okay just to work with people, bring in the Libra part of the Aries sort of polarity. So Scorpio is here to initially, Scorpio, even Pluto, there's this phase of things degenerating. It's the first phase, like the phoenix burning, falling to the ground. And then the second phase of it being rebirthed, the phoenix rising from the ashes. So you have that both. And that's the eighth house. You wouldn't have a hero's journey without the eighth house. You just have somebody who went and made a best friend, and then they went and jump roped, and then the person went back home. You have to have dragons. You have to have something to slay. You have to have Scorpio. You have to have eighth house stuff. So in our lives, when we experience this 30 months of Scorpio, expect intense emotional response to things. Expect it's possible to have the death of something. It could be a literal death of someone you love, a pet. It could be, it's a 30-month period of time, so a lot of things can happen in that space of time. But ultimately, in the end, it's helping you to let go of, look at the house that it's in, okay? It's helping you to let go of the things that have kept you stuck relative to that house, all right? We then have the progressed moon move into the ninth house or into Sagittarius. Sagittarius is, in my mind, that's like that little plant has sprung forth. It's out of the ground. It's like, here I am, have little leaves. It's expansive. It's growing up towards the sun. Sagittarius is all about belief. It is fulfilling the measure of its purpose. It was a little seed, and now it's doing what it's supposed to do. Moon in Sagittarius, we have a desire to move out from ourselves, to move away from. We just experienced 30 months of intense emotional evolution. We've become wiser, hopefully. We've learned things, okay? So now it's time to expand. and to teach others, perhaps. Sagittarius, the sign of the person who professes, the professor, the preacher, the teacher, the guru, the guide. We might even have an interest, again, if it's a progressive in Sag, in a different, it depends on the house, maybe we have an interest in going back to school or doing something with our life that has deep philosophical, existential meaning that is about improving the world around us. That's a very Sag, every Sagittarius I've ever known, even I've known some pretty lazy Sagittarius, they're good teachers. Even if it's just they have this ability to believe in people or to believe in an idea and to support that idea, sometimes naively, sometimes not. They just will go for it. They have that risk-taking. Again, I do love Sag, I always say that, but they have this openness to them, this authenticity that's very refreshing. It's like we've been through it. We've been through the Scorpio stuff and everything else. We're ready to make it it's not about me. It's about sort of spreading this message that I've learned to the world around me. In the Monomyth, this is the period of it's the reward. It's like seizing the sword. Yes, like all of that hard work. We got the thing. Awesome, right? And in astrology, the ninth house traditionally is this house of sort of good fortune, and Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, which is our big gas giant, sky god. Jupiter, interestingly enough, Jupiter. The myths are very interesting about Jupiter, but you can err on the side of being quite full of hubris. But Sagittarius is like full of expansive possibility. So when the progressed moon is there or it's in the ninth house, there's growth of some kind, okay? The question is, how can I teach others? How can I profess this? What can I do to improve the world around me with the things that I've learned? Again, look at house placement if it's, the moon's in Sag. Then we move into the 10th house, or we move into Capricorn. Capricorn is the archetype. Well, relative to the Monomyth, this is going to be the road back. You got a map, you got a plan, you're here, you got to get here. But you have to take this trip to get here. Capricorn is about planning that trip. It's also about knowing if I go this way, I'm not going to get here. So, Capricorn, there's a right and there's a wrong way to do things. And the road back is one that says, okay, we've learned things, we've become wizened. Now we've got to bring it back to the collective. We've got to come back home. Everything's always a cycle. So we've got to bring it back home and share it with the people that we care about. With the Capricorn, moon in Capricorn, we are focused many times on work. We're focused on our job, not necessarily our literal job, but our job in society. In your journey. Let's say your journey is you decide you want to be an Olympic swimmer. Olympics are on right now, right? The Capricorn portion of this journey would be working very hard every day, practicing. That's also kind of Virgo. But, it's focusing, eye on the prize. This is the direction I'm headed in and moving in that direction. There's an element of also maybe getting married. Maybe you got somebody who never thought they'd get married. The progressed moon moves into Capricorn, and let's say they've got a Capricorn on the descendant, or they've got strong Saturn in their 7th house or something, and they may be all of a sudden focused on, plus their progressed moon is going to move into their 7th house, they might be focused on belonging and commitment and being the protector, being in that role of, look, life is short, therefore I would like to take the role on of, it's not even a role really, it's just accepting another person to our space that we commit to going on this journey with. That's an element, a possible element. Depends on the house placement again. So, but the theme overall is, how am I going to get this back to the others? How am I going to share the thing that I learned? How am I going to show up in a way where people listen to me, where I'm respected? How can I do this in a way that's the right way? I want to live my life right. I want to do right by the people that I care about. Okay. After Capricorn, we then move into the 11th house, or into Aquarius, which is sort of the resurrection phase of the Monomyth. And with resurrection, this is an interesting, this one's a little trickier to blend with the Aquarius archetype, but really, if you are someone who's studied Christianity and this belief, this idea that we will all collectively be resurrected, good, bad, whomever you are, if you received a body at some point, you'll be resurrected back to your body. Okay, that's a collective experience. But Are all of our bodies the same? No, they are not. They're all different. They all look different. They've experienced different things on a soul level. We are all different, of course. We share collective traits, and then we also share the fact that we all have our own unique blend of what it is that makes us individual. So progressed moon in Aquarius is a period of time where perhaps we're rediscovering our relationship to the collective. The way that I see progressed moon in Aquarius is, I'm going to throw this in here as well. Imagine being in a state of, prior to being resurrected, okay? So your ego, in a sense, is dissolved to a certain extent. Like you've been doing this journey, 7th, 8th, 9th house. 9th house is a very kind of an impersonal house. It's about professing and teaching the others, sharing your wisdom with others. It's about the wisdom, right? 10th house becomes about, it's very concrete. It's like, how can I do this? What's the process that I can take with my life to become a productive member of society with where I'm at in my life? Aquarius is about, okay, we've got the status quo. We're going to have to go ahead and break that, okay? Resurrection, you're being reborn. Your ego, to a certain extent, is really crystallized in the 10th house, actually. The 11th house is sort of like, well, we're going to have to rebirth that. We're going to have to go ahead and dissolve that. Not like the 12th house, it's a different kind of dissolving. It's like breaking down the parts of us that held on to things that we believed were us. So for example, we've got different celebrities. So progressed moon in Aquarius, I've seen in the charts when people have a lot of emotional upset and emotional trauma. If it's in the 7th house, let's say, it's with their relationships. It's experiencing a partner cheating on you. Maybe you're married and your partner cheats on you and it makes you go a little crazy. There's this element with Aquarius, moon in Aquarius. I don't like the word crazy because I feel like there's value judgments placed on it. And this is not, I'm not saying crazy as in mentally, mentally ill. I'm saying unpredictable, irrational even. I mean, the moon's always irrational, but Aquarius wants things to be rational. It wants things to make sense. It's an air sign. But it's also about breaking boundaries, conventions, breaking from conventions. So we can have a period of time where we respond to things in a way that's a little crazy. Okay, it's a little like not maybe how we normally would respond to things. We may feel a little bit out of our minds at times. We can feel like who we were before is dying and is being reborn. So things that we might have thought we cared about before may shift and change. We may have a whole brand new focus. Now also with Aquarius is this idea, it relates to the star card in the tarot deck, of hope, universal hope for the future. Guess what? There are ways of doing things. There always have been throughout history. You do things a certain way that works for a period of time, and then that gets broken, and we create a new way. We innovate a new way of doing things. So in your life, this idea of resurrection, innovation. Look at the house placement. Okay, it's very important. A very big difference between having progressed moon in the 3rd house in Aquarius and progressed moon in the 8th house in Aquarius. Okay, in the 3rd house, the house of maybe the way your worldview works, you may just become someone who suddenly has an interest in diving into subject matter that's very fringe. With it in the 8th house, it might be, or the 7th house, that your partner cheats on you. It depends on where it falls, okay? But just whatever you're holding on to, Aquarius is coming along and reminding you, let go of it. You will be reborn, rebirthed, and in the end, you're going to be more free than you were when you were holding on to something so tightly, okay? So it's that resurrection, being born into a new body, into a new life, okay? And then finally, we have, of course, the last house, the 12th house, which is Pisces. This is the return. This is returning with the elixir. I even love that he puts the term elixir, on sort of this last phase, because when I think of the 12th house, I think of it also as the collective unconsciousness. I think of the ocean. I think of us being totally dissolved. If you've seen Prometheus, that opening scene when the alien or the maker, whatever they're called, he comes and he offers his body, sacrifices himself so that his DNA can become part of the earth, so the DNA can be available for life forms here on earth. He has to give up himself. So he is dissolved. That's Pisces. That's 12th house. That's moon in Pisces. You will experience a complete dissolving of ego. Ultimately, to get you to a space where you are more compassionate, you're more understanding. You're more in touch with the universal soul. I'm personally about to have my progressed moon move out of this 12th house into the first. And it has very much been, it starts out, the beginning phase is one of truly, if we connect this to the monomyth, you kind of don't know what you're doing. You don't know where you're going, okay? And if you consider that you just experienced a resurrection, you're like in a new body, so to speak. It's like a baby deer with these new wobbly legs. You're not really sure what you're doing with yourself. And, there's potential for great things to happen, but we don't know where we're going, and we don't know what we want. And the other thing with the moon is it's very much related to our habits. It's very habitual. Oh my gosh, what's my password? There we go. It's habitual. And with it in the 12th house, we can be unconsciously habitual about things. So some people will become sort of escapists during this phase, or they're in denial about their life or where they're going, and maybe things that mattered to them before the 30 months that they had that, or 60 months that they had that progressed moon in Capricorn, and then Aquarius, or 10th house and 11th house. Suddenly they're like, I don't really know what I care about right now. I just don't care about those things anymore. I've just let it all go. So it's like we're being returned to the womb. You're back in the amniotic fluid, that space of unconsciousness. You just have to let go and trust that you'll be taken care of. You're in a womb, you're an infant, you are like a baby fawn or like a little fetus. You are helpless to a certain extent on this journey. And it's accepting that that's okay, that you're helpless. It's, if you were to think about the plant metaphor, the seed is, it's planted, it's been watered, it's received sunshine, it's grown, it's been beautiful. In Capricorn, grew into a big oak tree, took years. Perhaps in Aquarius, it's getting cut down to be turned into a house, okay? When it's in Pisces, maybe that house burns down. Or the house just gets old and it just gets termites and it biodegrades and it returns back to the earth. The same thing happens to us on a psychological level. So the progressed moon in Pisces, or the 12th house, is a period of you just got to let go. You have to let go, and you have to trust your intuition. If something feels right to you, move in that direction. If it doesn't feel right to you, don't. And the beginning, you're probably going to make a lot of mistakes. Towards the end of it, you start to feel like, oh, like, okay, cool. Your intuition just starts to kind of know what it is you're supposed to do. You have these experiences where you procrastinate and you wait to take care of something, and then it all makes sense because, I've had multiple experiences with this personally, like having a distinct need to move and then having the house burn down after we moved, or, that's intuition. And it's not always logical. It doesn't always make sense to anybody but you. Or maybe it doesn't even make sense to you, but you have to follow your intuition. With the progressed moon in Pisces, we will turn many times to other people. We are trying ultimately to return that elixir. We think of the house burning down. We started with a little seed, an oak acorn. Then we ended up with a house with oak floorboards or something, right? Those floorboards burn, return to the earth. Is that a bad thing? No, not necessarily. Return to the earth so that it can then be used again by a new little acorn to grow anew. It's just a cycle. So whenever someone wants to put a negative or positive spin on anything, they're missing the point. It's just a part. There's always, whenever something's full, it's going to be empty. Whenever it's empty, it's going to be filled again. So just be with where you're at. That's all you got. Okay, hope that was helpful. Any thoughts I love, and I'm sure I've left many things out, so this is just my off the top of my head. Hope you have a great week, and message me if you've got questions. If you'd like a reading, come to the website, moderncosmic.com. Birth chart readings, my very favorite thing. My very, very, very favorite thing actually would be life purpose, career. And it's the one thing when I read for people that usually stands out quite clearly. It's the one where I'll read for people I don't even know, and like, oh, looks like you're an anthropologist or an archaeologist or something, and they are, So if for whatever reason, if you need help with life purpose, that's one of my favorite things to help people with, and I would love to be of service. So, all right, hope you have a good one, and take care. Bye-bye.